College golf is beginning in a few weeks. Talking with a few coaches, talking with Tanya Thomas, the head golf coach at Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania. Thanks for your time, coach. How are you doing today?
Of course, I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Just tell me, how's your summer been so far, and what are some of the things you've been doing this summer?
Whew, we've been doing a lot of recruiting. We go
Okay.
through the pre-read process in the summer, which is a process that allows us to kind of see where kids are academically. As you may know, Swarthmore is a pretty high academic achieving school, and so it's difficult for us to really assess whether or not students are viable recruits until we get them cleared through admissions. So that process takes place in the summer for the following school year. So right now I'm working on the class of 2026. So
Mhm.
we kind of take viable candidates and we see what admissions thinks of them. And we've been doing that all summer. I've been doing some recruiting for me that we don't have a huge recruiting budget at Division 3. So that means a lot of online, uh,
Yep.
you know, research and communications with recruits and doing some family stuff as well. I have 3 kids of my own, and we've been, all in transition. I got 3 kids moving 3 different ways, going to college next year. So it's been a busy summer.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about Swarthmore College? I know it's a private liberal arts college in Pennsylvania, and as you mentioned, good academics. It has an acceptance rate of less than 10%, so pretty good, school. So can you just tell me about your college a little bit?
Sure. Swarthmore College is a Division 3 institution. We
Mhm.
are, as you said, outside of Philadelphia. We are right on the train line, which is super nice. Our students get a free train pass to go in and out of Philadelphia easily. We are in a consortium of schools with Bryn Mawr College, Haverford College, and Penn, so our kids can go to classes at those 3 institutions as well as classes at our school. And their students can come to ours, which is nice. We have about 1,200 students, so it's not a very large school. It's a residence campus, which means most of our students stay on campus all 4 years. We are 93% do that. In fact, just ironically,
Mhm.
3 of, or actually now this year, 4 of my students will not be on campus. They are living in the town of Swarthmore, which is adjacent to us and is super accessible. It's within walking distance. So, but most of our students do stay on campus, and we have a very diverse community from all over the world. We have kids from on our team alone. We have kids from China. Last year we had a kid from Mexico. So we are quite diverse and it's a great community, as you said, liberal arts college. So it's an opportunity for kids to explore how they learn and what they want to learn versus sort of being put into a box, which is a great aspect of all liberal arts colleges. But I think we've done it pretty well. We have a amazing faculty that supports our students. So lots of research, lots of grants going on. So um, and one of the things I like to tout is we have the largest endowment of any school per capita, meaning of our alumni, which is small in number. We do quite well. So that allows us to do a lot more with our dollars, when it comes to athletics, when it comes to, the student athlete and student, experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned recruiting. Just how is like recruiting for you, not only at Division 3, but just recruiting in general, given that your school has, such high academics. How is that for you? Because I'm sure, it can be difficult for you not only recruiting at Division 3, but also recruiting because, your school has less than, 10% acceptance rate and such high academics. So how is that for you both, recruiting at Division 3 and recruiting, given that, your academics are so high at your college?
Yeah. So recruiting is actually interesting. I've been doing this for 30 years, and this is the highest academic school I've ever been at. And so
Yeah.
the biggest, concern for me is getting kids in. It's not really finding them. I have quite a lot of interest.
Okay.
Um, when you when you are frequently ranked, Swarthmore is often ranked in the top one, two, or three schools in the country for liberal arts schools. So we get the attention
Okay.
from higher level students, the students that are interested in Ivy Leagues and higher level educations, academically at least. The problem for me is getting them in. So I might have a kid with a very high SAT and a pretty high GPA, and the college will just say no. They're not, they don't think they'll be successful here, or they don't feel like it's a good fit, and I don't have a lot of say in that. And so because that high academic level is the focus of our institution, when athletics comes in and wants to bring in certain students, there are many incidences where the admissions department just says, this just isn't a great fit. So I could bring them Tiger Woods. Hey,
Yeah.
this kid is as good as he gets. Let me bring him here. And they might say, well, we have concerns about these grades or this other situation, testing or whatever. So it is a challenge, but it's also, I feel like I have a lot of kids to choose from every year because there is so much interest in us academically, and we get international interest. And that is something for me that is pretty exciting because, I get to learn a lot about different cultures and people interested. Right now, I have a kid from Shanghai I'm recruiting, another one from Madrid, Spain I'm recruiting. So, and another one from New Zealand, actually. So we get a lot of interest from elsewhere, and that makes it a little bit more exciting and fun for me to learn about new kids and new cultures. But the academics are very, very high. It drives most of our recruiting model.
Yeah. And so your school is a Division three school, so maybe not, the golf isn't as intense as say a Division one or two, but I noticed that with your upcoming season, you'll have a tournament like, October 11th, 12th, and then, right after that, another tournament October 14th to 15th. So my next question is just, given the academics are so high at your school, how do you see that your players usually are able to balance, the high academics and, the college golf, both of those being on the road, being at, tournaments and also balancing their academics? How do you think your players are able to do that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And funny you picked out those two events in our schedule because the
Yeah.
only reason we are able to have those events that close together is because that's our fall break. So our kids won't
Okay.
really
That
be
makes
in
sense.
class. Typically, you'll see our tournaments are mostly on weekends. They might be on a Saturday, Sunday, but more common on a Friday, Saturday, or a Sunday, Monday. And it's very challenging for them to go week to week. They focus a lot on their academics. And so I will often see my players studying in the van on the drives to the tournaments, or on a Saturday night when we've just competed all day for, been at the golf course for 7, 8, 9 hours.
Yeah.
They're coming back, we have dinner, and then they're studying. We try to get our hotel rooms, we try to get one room that's, we call it the study room, where, if a kid has a test coming up or a paper they have to write, they can go in there and have some peace and quiet. So it's a little bit more intense in the academic area. And because of that, we have to, allow them the grace to miss practice when appropriate, and, manage their time in a different way. I would definitely, I coached at the Division 1 level early in my career, but have been coaching Division 3 for 25 years. And I will say I've seen a huge growth in the seriousness
Mhm.
of how we as coaches approach Division 3 and institutions approach it. So it's definitely more competitive. And I wouldn't say by any means that it's less focused on athletics. It's just a true balance. And our mission in Division 3 in general is that school comes first.
Yeah.
But for me, being the golf coach, golf is a close second behind. And there are things you give up to be a college golfer at the Division 3 level, at a high academic institution like this. And one of the things is, things like the parties and the social life and the clubs and some of the other things that college kids typically like to do, those have to be put on hold for about 2 months in the fall and again for 2 months in the spring. But there's plenty of time to do that. In the off season, which, generally runs from the middle to end of October through the beginning of March.
Yeah,
There's time to do that. So they get a nice balance, and I wouldn't trade it for the world if I were a student athlete now. Um, and I think that my players, most of them would agree with that. It's a family. It's a great opportunity to have a built-in group of friends when you come to college and do something you love while going to school. So it's a pretty great, it's a plush situation for them.
yeah. And how do your students, and your players, how did they feel like they like it? As you mentioned, you're a Division 3 school, you're near a big city in Philadelphia, but you're also a smaller school. So I, have experience with that. I went to a smaller school just in Vermont near well, their big city. But anyway, just how do you feel like your students at Swarthmore like it? Being at a smaller school, but then also, so you can have the smaller atmosphere on campus, but then you can also go into the big city of Philadelphia. So just how do you feel
Yeah.
like your students like that?
Yeah. I mean, most of my students sometime in their 4 years will take a class down at Penn. And so they just take the train in as they, hit, the 21 legal age. They definitely use the train more to go into Philadelphia and do, you know, do things like go to games and the Philadelphia Phillies games and things like that, around the schedule. It's nice for them to have that big city nearby, but Swarthmore is definitely a little haven. It is in the woods, it's in a suburb about 11 miles away, and so it's very peaceful. We have over 200 acres of walking paths and something we call Crum Woods, which has a river, and it's very peaceful and quiet out there while being close to the city. So I often say a lot of liberal arts colleges are tucked away the way we are, but they're hard to get to. For us, for our international kids who are coming in from long distances, they fly right into Philly and they're on our campus within 15 minutes. So
Yeah,
that there's a lot of amenities and advantages to being close to a big city while still getting the small family-like community feel of a liberal arts college.
yeah. And you just talked about it, and I've talked to coaches about this. Even coaches who are international, I've talked to them about this. But how do you see that? Getting acclimated for a freshman is, both for, how do you see just a freshman? Because you'll have some this year from like, Florida and Illinois and Connecticut, New Jersey. So how do you feel like the acclimation is for the American freshmen, and then for the internationals? Do you see that the acclimation, getting comfortable both on campus and on the golf team is different for an international student versus an American student? Because you'll have
Right.
some this year. You have a young man from Hong Kong and China, and then you also have some Americans coming in as
Yeah.
freshmen. So just how do you feel like? Do you see that the acclimation is different from international versus American, or is it pretty much the same?
Yeah, I mean, going to college is a hard time for everybody.
Yeah,
For freshmen, it's a big change. It's something already with your family, with your golf situation. It's just a big change for everyone. And so for many of these kids, the first time they've been away from their families. So it is an adjustment for everyone. I think Swarthmore does a great job. We bring international students in 10 days before school actually starts, and they have a international orientation specific to them. I think that really helps them a lot adjust to the language, adjust to the school itself, to living in a dormitory, which might be different for some of them. So that is good that they get them, ready so quickly. But all students come in a week early, so even American students come in a week early if they're not international, and they have orientation activities. We have a swim requirement at Swarthmore. They have to go through a swim test. So we have that. They have activities where they get to know each other. It's such a small community that it's really imperative for them to have those early connection points with other students on campus, not just student athletes. We are technically a spring sport, even though we do play really quickly in the fall. And so for us, we are not permitted to bring them into preseason. Even if we did, it would only be during orientation anyway. We have so many freshmen this year. We have 7 incoming freshmen that it's going to feel a little like preseason for them just because they will be here already. But I think it really does help to have a team, to be a part of a team, to be already have your built-in social network. And for them, being able to get to campus and know that they're immediately practicing and immediately playing, doing something they're familiar with and that they like is an exciting time for them. So while it is a challenge, I think most of them do pretty well. And I think this class in particular, coming in with 7 freshmen, that's a lot of freshmen. Last year, I only had one, just to give you perspective. But to have 7, it was an incredibly huge number for Swarthmore. I don't even really know what happened. But these kids will have a lot of kids, right just like them, going through the same things at the same time. And so they do adjust pretty well. I have found by Christmas time, during the break, they're ready to go home, but they have had a lot of experiences already, and it moves so quickly because we are in season that they do pretty well.
Yeah. And then being Division 3, when you're recruiting, or just, what are some of the things that you would, say to a recruit, or just, how would you, pitch Division 3, to a recruit, or just what are some of the great things you would say about Division 3 golf?
So that's a good question. I have completely transformed my thinking on Division 1, 2, and 3 since my playing days. I played Division 1. I love the model of Division 1. I think it's competitive and amazing. But things have changed a lot. Division 1 with NIL and
Yeah.
the all the different, or there's just so many things that are put upon a Division 1 player, and there's a place for that. There's a place for that with Olympians. There's a place for that with future LPGA, PGA players. There's a place for that, but I think for the vast majority of student athletes, I have come to appreciate and love the model that they get to play their sport because they love it, and not because anyone's making them play, not because they're being paid to play, but because they truly want to, while going to school. And there's a lot of benefits for sure in being a student athlete. There's built-in family. There's, at least in the golf world, they get to go to wonderful golf courses all the time and play with their friends. I mean, what could be better? But at the same time, ultimately, school comes first.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think they keep their priorities in the right place. And they're driven by their own desire to succeed at this level and to play at this level. And there is plenty to achieve. We have, roughly 20 uh, tournament dates a year where we play, which is about 10 tournaments. And that's in addition to the conference championship and the hopefully national championship. So we have things we're trying to accomplish both individually and as a team.
Yeah.
And I think that motivates most players to keep practicing and playing in every possible moment they can around their academic schedule. The ones that don't, the ones that come and they maybe are playing for, to get into school, or they liked it in high school, but they're too busy now in college because they're a pre-med student or they have some other challenges. Academically, most students do figure out a balance, but those who don't, they just move on. It's not a matter of maybe a scholarship for them and keeping them in school or something like that. They can truly play because they want to and not because they have to. And I love that model. And I think even more than ever in with the NCAA and everything it's going through and the challenges it's facing, and athletes in general and the high level that everyone's trying to achieve. I think that Division III remains a safe haven for student athletes who truly embody what playing golf or any sport in college is supposed to be. And that is for, the love of sport. And that's what
Mhm.
I want as a parent for my own children and also for these players is I want you to understand all the benefits you get from being on a team, from participating, from having goals, from working hard, from managing your time and having friends and all the things you get from being a college athlete that don't involve money and fame and something you're going to get back from it in the end.
Yeah,
So I really love the Division III model, and I explain that to players who are very talented, who have other goals in life, besides playing professional golf. So I've been pushing it more and more. I get it's not for everybody, right? Some kids rely on the scholarship to go to school or whatever, but it's a pretty great model. It's a pretty
yeah,
great model.
definitely. So
Yeah.
for my next point, college golf, obviously you play in the fall, September and October, and then you also play in the spring. At your Division 3 at your school, then in the spring you'll pick it up in, March. So just at Division 3 at your school, how do you, navigate the, few months, the 4 months off that you have for the, the winter? Because I've talked with some, like even at Penn State, I talked with, even there in Pennsylvania, I talked with the coach, and I've talked with some Division 1, athletes over the winter, like, Texas and Kansas and things like that. So I've talked to some, of the top Division 1 college athletes, and even some of them have different ways that they approach the winter break. It's not as long at Division 1. You have off, 3 months, November, December, and January, and then you start in February. But, you know, some athletes have different, ways they approach or ways they were approaching the winter break. One college golfer I talked with was prioritizing rest, taking, a few months off from competition. Another one said it was important to compete during the winter. So just, at Swarthmore and just at Division 3, how do you approach the few months, the 4 months that you have off, during the winter from competition, and just how do you approach that so that you also keep your, golfer's game, sharp come, March in the springtime?
Right. So at Swarthmore, the off season is truly theirs. We put an emphasis on allowing them that time to get caught up in school, to finish their fall season off, their fall, semester off strong, academically, and get a good solid base started in the spring when they come back. Basically, we finish the end of October, and that gives us basically the beginning of November or all of November and then the beginning of December. So it's only about 6 weeks where, they're not technically in golf season, but they, don't, they haven't left yet. So because we have that full month break in between, I encourage kids, it's a time I encourage them to compete. It's a time when they don't have the pressures of school. They have a full month off. And if they have the means and ability and they come from a location where they can compete, where maybe they go down to Florida or somewhere, in another country where they're from, if they can compete, I encourage them to do so. But while they're on campus, we do have an indoor simulating machine. We
Okay.
have a TrackMan, we have a putting green and a locker room that is just dedicated to golf. And that makes it really nice for us. The kids are in there all day, every day when they can be. It's sort of their hangout place. They eat dinner in there, they have putting contests in there. And then I set up optional week-long contests on the TrackMan where they have an entire week to accomplish a certain goal. Maybe we have a wedge contest a certain week, and they can go in there anytime they want, 24 hours a day, and they can accomplish that task anytime during that week. So and they can do it as many times as they want. So maybe the task is a wedge competition on the TrackMan, and they get a score out of it, and it maybe takes them 45 minutes to complete that task. They can do it as many times as they want and record their score. they can keep trying to beat themselves over and over if they want, or they can just do it one time, or no times, honestly. But then they're not, and we have little prizes and little incentives and things, ways for them to stay engaged with one another. We do weekly meetings where they will, I'll bring a rules official in and we'll talk about the rules, or we'll bring a nutritionist and talk about the best way to optimize their performance on the golf course from a nutrition standpoint. So we do a lot of that kind of programming, but all of the actual golf is again, as everything with Division 3, it's sort of motivated what they want to do. So there's about 6 weeks in the fall and again 6 weeks in the spring where they're on campus and have no golf, specific golf to do. Last year, the weather was great all the way up until mid-November, so they were still going to the golf course optionally. They can choose to go there on their own and still practice. So, you know, it flies by with the month that they have off of school. They go home and then they come back. There's only 6 more weeks. We're getting ready. We have lots of meetings and things getting ready, and we do our media day in there and other kind of programming. And then we're off and running with our spring break trip. We usually go on a spring break trip somewhere to warmer weather to get ready for our season. So yeah, it goes by fast, faster than you would think.
Yeah, definitely. So coach, your season in the fall will begin in a month. You're going to play on Long Island, New York, Farmingdale State's tournament. So just what do you look forward to with this upcoming season, and just how does your team look going into this season?
Well, this is a big question mark this year. I have 7 incoming freshmen, and
Oh, yeah.
several of those are international.
Mhm.
While I follow scores and I do my homework and I watch what they're doing, some kids have never seen the kind of grass we have. Some kids have never seen the level of moisture in our ground in comparison with where they're from. And so transition can be a little bit rocky in the beginning for some of them, depending where they're coming from. And so we're going to be doing a lot of, or as many, uh, like qualifying rounds as we can very quickly to try and determine who our traveling squad is. But it won't be determined by the time we get to Farmingdale State. Of course, we'll have to decide. We're taking an individual to Farmingdale, so we'll be taking 6. So I'll get 6 players on the field at that point. But if you look at our schedule this year, we're instituting 2 B team events so that I can
Okay.
see these kids play because I have so many freshmen this year. My freshmen outnumber the entire rest of my squad. So I have 6 returning and 7 incoming freshmen. So I really need to determine who our strongest players are and who's playing the best, and keep giving opportunities for all of our players to start to settle in and relax and get used to the grasses and get used to the environment and get used to the balance between academics and athletics. So we will be trying to practice and play as much as we can around our tournaments and get everyone ready. The fall is going to be a time to learn who our players are,
Mhm.
and we're just going to have to take some bumps in the road. I suspect we'll have a lot of tournaments where our individuals and our non-competing players are playing better than our competing players, and we'll be doing some moving around of all those players to determine really who is rising to the top. And the goal would be then to be ready in the spring to really see who's ready to play and get us to where we want to get, which is to win our conference championship and get to the nationals.
Yeah. So two things I was interested in learning about. I guess my first question, just tell me what's it like? You're having 7 incoming freshmen. So what's it like going to be having such a young team this upcoming season?
So we're not new to that. When I got to Swarthmore, this is only my 4th year at Swarthmore. In my first year at Swarthmore, we had 16 kids. I came in and I vowed not to, just disrupt the whole, boat, but just to sit back and watch and see what was going on with that class. And it became apparent that a lot of the kids were just there for the friendships and for the fun, but not really willing to put in the work and the time. And that was fine. I just I didn't see a lot of point in keeping kids on the team to do that. And so slowly but surely they dropped off and we got down to a pretty low number over the last 2 to 3 years. That's why we only had a total of 6 kids last year returning and only one graduate. So we had a very small team there for 2 years, just trying to figure out, our balance and what Swarthmore could get in for me and the kinds of kids they were looking for. So that was all a bumpy road for me, adjusting to the admissions process and all of that. So, I think that having such a small incoming class, I started, feeling uncomfortable with the numbers that we were keeping. So I kind of was a little more aggressive with this class and I ended up with 7. So we're trying to find the balance of that, but we had a very young class. My very first class here, I brought in 4 to replace all those kids that were kind of moving on and focusing on their academics and graduating. So we have been young every year that I've been here. We continue to have a very young class. I think that's for a number of reasons. I think Swarthmore, it gets more difficult as students get closer to graduation and they get more focused on their academic journey. And so we tend to lose those kids to academics. I think that the kids we're bringing in now, though, are a lot more focused on wanting to do both as long as they can. So I suspect this year is going to be similar in that we're going to be very young, but I also think these are very dedicated golfers and very focused on trying to help us as a team make some real changes, make some real step up on the national ranking scales and really improving. So I expect it to be a super fun year. I'm super excited about
Yeah.
it. And I know our returning players share those goals and ambitions that I have for the team. And I expect it to be a pretty competitive year. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And you mentioned you have a B team and you also have some women individual players. So just tell me a little about that and what's it like giving more opportunities for other players, who may not be on the main team, they may
Yeah.
be on the B team or just your few women players you have on your roster, just giving them other opportunities to play and compete in some tournaments.
Yeah, so the women are completely separate in terms of that because both of them can't really compete
Okay.
athletically with our men. So we are keeping them on the men's roster for now because Swarthmore has the intention to start a women's team very soon. It's not unusual for Swarthmore to have women on the roster because we don't have a women's team yet. We have had women on in our program in the past. And in fact, we have several alumni who are very involved and female alumni who are very involved and really want to see Swarthmore add women's golf. And so it's not unusual for us to have this model. They don't, however, compete with the men or even really practice with the men. They have their own practice time and they do more their own thing because we don't support a women's team yet. They play very seldom competitions because we don't have a budget for them yet. We don't have we don't have really anything to support them. So they kind of are out there just waiting for us to add women's golf, but they do compete in events as individual women. So because we don't have a full team, they will go to women's events as individuals. And they usually compete in 1 or 2 events a semester. So they're just kind of over there, dedicated golfers wanting to be on a team, wanting to start a women's team, but just not quite ready for that yet. So both of them are doing that, and they're wonderful kids, and they keep our GPA up, but they are the way that it has to be for the NCAA in the absence of a women's team is they have to be rostered with the men's team. So that's where they are. As far as the B team, I don't know who those kids are yet. We have 13 players between our 6 freshmen, I mean, our 6 returners and our 7 freshmen. We will have 13 players. And I think it's going to be mixed up a lot. I'm having the B teams, events so that I can see them compete over and over. And that's the way legally each individual student can only play in 20 competitive dates. So we're trying to provide as many opportunities to play as often as possible. So I'm not thinking of our B team as a separate team at all. I'm thinking of individuals rotating between A and B to see sort of who's competing the best and who's playing the best in the fall. I may throw in another B team tournament in the spring just to, continue that and see where we are, after a long break and all that. But, eventually we will have to narrow down who our top five are. And those B team events are an effort to do that. So, we don't get points, we don't get rankings when you designate a competition as a B competition. You don't get any ranking benefits of doing that. So it truly is for the opportunity for the student athlete to engage them in competition and provide a student athlete experience for everybody on my team. I want every single person on my team engaged. I don't want them just sitting there taking, you know, opportunities to play, to opportunities, to get uniforms and bags and all those things without an opportunity to compete and show up.
Yeah.
So that's what the B team events are for.
Yeah. Coach, so you grew up in California. Can you tell me a little bit about your background with golf, growing up playing as a junior and just, how you got started playing golf, growing up in California?
Sure. So I grew up in San Diego. I played in one of the most storied and well, really prolific with a number of amazing people who have come out of the San Diego Junior Golf Association. It was one of the first. It is a terrific safe haven place to learn how to play golf. Their model there is to put juniors, meaning 10 and unders, and even 11 and 12s at small par three golf courses, and we have a number of them, although they are starting to lose steam out in San Diego the way they were when I was a kid, but there was lots of them. And so we competed on those little golf courses that were appropriate for our size and our abilities. And what did is it developed young golfers. It developed them in their short game, which is where you should be developing a very young player. Unfortunately, back east, I see a lot of littles, 8 and 9 year olds going out to full golf courses, and they go there and even with 5 or 6 or 7 great golf shots, they're just getting to the green. So that's not very fun, right? They don't get pars and birdies, and they don't understand that model. But when you're playing on a par three golf course, as a little guy, you learn the game the way it should be taught, as from short game up, not from long game down. And so San Diego was a great place to do that. I learned to play with my dad. My dad was actually didn't take up the game till he was 30. And so he was learning the game as I was learning the game. And we had many, many fun competitions. I also grew up around some of the best golfers in the world. I, was the same age as Elizabeth Bowman, who played at UCLA, Christy Erb, who played at UCLA, Phil Mickelson, who ended up playing at Arizona State with me, Susan Pankow, she played down at the U of A. I was around some Manny Zerman, who was from South Africa, but later transferred to my high school. He was runner-up to Phil Mickelson in the USAM in the 80s. So we have really great players. Harry Rudolph, he ended up playing at Oklahoma State. So some really great players I played around. And, the mentorship in San Diego Junior Golf was terrific. As we got older and as we started growing, we would go up to Southern California Junior Golf Association. So we'd drive up to LA and play in those events. And then it was the very birth of the AJGA, which is now a thriving and crazy, awesome, tour. But back then it was just a fledgling tour that was trying to attempt to get kids from all over the country and offer scholarships so that kids could go to tournaments. Back then, everybody used to stay with host families. We didn't stay in hotels, and it wasn't a business. It was a family. So the kids would travel around with the AJGA. So it was a great way to grow up. I would say I had a different, growing up than I think a lot of kids, certainly than my sister. My sister was an athlete as well, but she was a gymnast and a basketball player. And, she took a different path. But for me, it was all golf every second I could get to the golf course out off of school. We would go down there, and I worked at a little golf course right below my high school named Stardust. We would pull the mats out, every morning before school, and we would pull them in every evening after school. But in the meantime, we would chip and putt and practice and hit golf balls, and we all did it, every one of us, and it was a wonderful youth growing up that way. And I felt very lucky to be able to go to Arizona State. My son is actually at Arizona State now. He's the third generation. My dad went to Arizona State, then I went to Arizona State, and now my son. So skipping over a state to go to Arizona State was a likely, transfer of my talents to that institution. That's what I always wanted to do since I was 8, 9, 10 years old. So I never even considered anywhere else. That was where I was going from the very beginning. So yeah, I'm proud of my past. I definitely took a
Yeah.
different path. There wasn't a lot of nonsense going on for me. It kept me out of a lot of trouble and kept me focused. A lot of my friends were doing the beach, in San Diego and things like that. That wasn't me. All my friends were golfers. So
Yeah.
um, I had a lot of fun, and it brought me to where I am today. I certainly, am not, a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, but I love what I do. And I think that's a real goal in life, to do things you love. So here I am, and I learned from the best. The best thing about my background is the family that I came from, and then the family I entered at Arizona State, and my coach, Linda Volstead, obviously being the most storied,
Mhm.
women's golf coach of all time. So very proud to have learned under her, and hopefully, taking some of the things she taught me into my coaching career.
Yeah. So you mentioned you always wanted to go to Arizona State, and you got to play for, obviously a great coach in Linda Volstead. So just how was your time at Arizona State? Before you went there, they had, they'd never won a national championship. They had some runner-ups in, 84 and 88. So just how was it, going to Arizona State, getting to play for Coach Volstead and just, playing for a team that never won a national championship, but they had two runner-up finishes because that's kind of a unique, situation. They've been
Yeah.
close to winning a national championship, but before you got there, they never actually, won a championship.
Yeah. So, you know, keep in mind, I went to school in 1988.
Yeah.
So, um, there was only 60 women's programs in the whole country. Even though Title IX had already started, nobody was really enforcing it. And so the schools weren't really doing much to implement women's programs. And so there just wasn't a lot of programs back then. I mean, certainly college golf was a thing, but for me, I hadn't really considered another institution. So um, when I talked to Coach Volstead about going there, I would not say I was her highest recruit by any means. But that was where I had set my sights on going from the very beginning. I knew that they were one of the best schools in the country. I am definitely a warm weather person. And I knew that's where I wanted to go. So, when I got there, to be truthful, it was a bumpy ride for me. I was one of the stronger golfers out of San Diego at that time. And when I got there, I was playing, well, we won the national championship my sophomore year. So Coach Volstead was recruiting some of the best players in the world. And I had an international team, and there I was kind of wondering what had happened. I certainly wasn't as successful as I had been in San Diego, and it was a little bit of a bumpy ride for me my freshman year. I had a hard time translating my confidence in my game to the people around me, because they were so much stronger than me and talented women. So my freshman year was a little bumpy. By sophomore year, I started recognizing that maybe my path wasn't to the LPGA like I thought it was. And, I felt very blessed and fortunate to be in a place where I could hone those skills, but I quickly realized that I wanted to coach. By sophomore year, by the end of my sophomore year, I was very clear that I wanted to coach. And it was at that point that I think I had a switch and I started watching what my coach was doing, how she did it, what she did, how she communicated, how she organized her time, what it meant to be focused and dedicated. And I started really asking her more and more about the process. And that's when things changed for me. And it was a little bit hard, I think, to make that switch from, being a college golfer to being a or thinking I wanted to be a coach. And that was a hard switch for me. But once I did it, I didn't look back. I knew I wanted to coach from the very beginning. It's very difficult for a 20 something year old, to get a job, coaching 20 something year olds. But lucky for me, golf was exploding at that time. They finally said, we're going to be serious about this Title IX and we're going to start, having penalties for teams that don't do what they're, for schools that don't implement the Title IX model, and everything changed.
Yeah.
And there were lots and lots of job opportunities. And I did go briefly to grad school after that because I wasn't getting the jobs that I wanted to get. I was 21 years old, 22 years old at that time. So very difficult for a 22-year-old to be coaching a 21-year-old. So I had to wait a couple years, but I got my job eventually, and here I am today. So it was a good path.
Yeah. And in 1990, your team at Arizona State won the first national championship in program history. So just what was it like, 1990, or, teammates with the current women's coach, Missy? And so just tell me about your team and just what it was like to win the first national championship in program history, especially
Yeah.
given that your team at Arizona State had a few, runner-up finishes prior to that.
Yeah. So being a part of that team is probably one of my most proud things. And to be frank with you, like I wasn't on that traveling squad that won that. I was on the team, not the squad.
Okay.
But my coach did an amazing job of making every single person on the team feel like their role, like they had a role, like they had a job, whether it was keep the grades up or push the other players to greatness, or they themselves be the ones, that are achieving greatness. And because of that, I felt very important in the process. And being a part of it is, every bit, the joy of my life. The men won the same year. So the men and women won, in 1990. So the entire athletic department was abuzz with, oh, sorry, my dog is, should we pause this or do you want me to get him out of here? Sorry, let me get him out of here if you don't mind. Do you mind?
Okay. No problem. Yeah.
Sorry. Um, okay. I'm back. Okay. So yeah, that year we had the men and women won, and it was just really incredible to be celebrated by the athletic department together. And I mean, you definitely felt like you were walking amongst greatness on both sides. I mean, we had amazing players on that team, Missy included, who were just so dedicated. And, you could learn every day when you were, we had our own end of the driving range in those days and our own, the Hobbs House, which was, our practice facility down there. And, to watch the process that they took to practice, I learned so many things in those years. And I think maybe what helps me be a successful coach today because I have so much, you know, of their knowledge in my back pocket, just watching them, how they practice, what they focus on, learning about stats and how to read your stats and how to look for little ways to improve because golf is such a slow, improvement process, especially when you get to those higher levels. Um, it's fun. It's a fun process, and I learned so many things in those years. And of course, winning is fun, but it's the process. I think that was really, sort of more, mind bending for me to see how, and it wasn't just one person, it was the whole men's team, the whole women's team, everybody has their own different process and realizing how that can benefit them. It really helped me understand how different people are. I remember one story, back then we used to have these little yellow Walkmans that we would hook up with earphones. And I remember thinking, well, you know, people should not be listening to music when they're practicing. And I remember my coach telling a girl on my team, I would like you to get a Walkman and I would like you to listen to music while you're practicing. And I was shocked that that was her attitude. But certainly it wasn't for me. It was for her because she was different. She needed that rhythm and that, she needed that timed, beat of music and in her ear to help her, practice with her golf swing. Very different than somebody like me who's high strung and music kind of makes me amp up a little bit. So everybody's different. And I learned that as a player on that team, watching different people accomplish different things and go to that end goal with a very different process and to give people what they need and not what you think they need and to help them find what is their path is part of what coaching is all about. And I think, watching those successful years is probably what helped me understand different people and different needs of people.
Yeah. As an alum of Arizona State, what's it been like to see the success they've had? Even after you graduated, 93 to 95, they won national championships. 97 and 98, they won. And then even recently, they've had success. I talked with, Coach Llewellyn, who was the coach before Missy. They won in 2009. I talked to her and I talked with Missy about winning in 2017. So just what's it like? You started the success that they had at Arizona State, and then, even now they've had success. Just what's it like to see the success that the women's programs had at Arizona State?
I am over the moon, elated, proud,
Yeah.
so interested in every tournament they play in. All of my friend group from college, we get together once a year and try to go, somewhere and reconnect. So we all, as a group, have text chains that we all keep up. So we are all constantly following Missy's career and the success of Arizona State. It is a very prideful part of my life. And now that I have the ability to give back a little, I support them. I am constantly trying to, stay in touch with Missy. I get to see her every year, at least at the coaches convention because it does span all divisions, and so we get to reconnect there. And it is so fun to watch her succeed because she's been through so much, but also the team succeed. I'm a part of that team and I will always be a part of that team. I pass that down as a coach to my players that they're always a part of our family that we create wherever we are. And that is one of the joys of coaching is to watch, to understand how important the role you have as a coach is in the lives of these players and their teammates are going to be for the rest of their lives because I live it. These are the most important people in my life are my former teammates. So watching them have these successes is just so joyful. And we support Missy any way we can. And we go back in fact, we're having a reunion this November in Phoenix. So we'll be all going back and reconnecting. And it's our first one. Well, it's our first big one since since COVID. So we are all very excited to do that. And the last time I was back, I believe, was when they won the national championship. We went and celebrated with the girls. So yeah, I keep up with them a lot and very, very proud of them.
Yeah, definitely.
And of
So
Missy. And of
yeah,
Missy. She's doing a great job.
yeah, definitely. So after Arizona State, I wanted to talk about you spent 4 years at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. You began
Yep.
the women's golf program in '95. So, just tell me about how it was like. Because I've talked with coaches. I talked with Carol Robertson. She started the women's program at Virginia Tech. So I've had experience talking with coaches who started Division I programs. And so, for your perspective, just how was it starting the women's program at Northern Arizona. And then after you started at 95, your team instantly had success. You won conference titles in 96 and 97. So just talk about starting the women's program and just instantly what was it like to have success, winning conference championships, right away.
Yeah, so I will tell you the only way you can be successful is to have an athletic department that supports you.
Hmm.
And I had an athletic department that supported me, and they didn't, the answer is not always yes. I mean, you don't always have unlimited dollars and unlimited resources, but the answer was let's figure this out. Let's try to find a way to get you what you need. And this was before the age of simulators and indoor facilities and all that. And Flagstaff is a cold place. There's a lot of snow there.
Yeah.
So we used to drive from Flagstaff down the switchbacks down to Sedona, which is much lower in elevation and not all the way down to Phoenix, but certainly much lower in elevation, about halfway, that we could get some golf in the colder months. And it made a huge difference for us to be able to do that and have the resources to be able to do that. But dialing back a little bit, sorry, it was a time when sorry, my dog is um it was a time when you know golf teams were popping up everywhere. We were we were trying to start a program and compete at the division one level. You have to be able to go international. You have to be able, and this is sort of before internet and those things making it easy to see all these tournaments at wherever they were. I got lucky and I had a young lady from Wales who ended up going back and playing on the European tour for a number of years. She was very, very talented. And I got her the very first year. And that helped to launch the second year. I brought a friend of hers over. So sometimes when in recruiting, you kind of get a niche in a certain place, and you get a little pipeline of people coming from that place. And I did that from Wales, and I got these two young ladies from Wales, and they were super talented, and they were really the backbone of our team. In addition, we had some people, some great talented players from down in Phoenix. I had a girl from Washington, a number of kids from, spattered throughout the United States, one very talented young lady from New Mexico. So I knew that the key to success would be to recruit and recruit hard and recruit early, but I could not have done it without full support of my athletic department and full funding, which was, something the athletic department had to stretch to be able to start that team. And we had to find golf courses. Lucky for me, all the three golf courses in Flagstaff at the time were supportive of us and allowed us to practice and play there. So it was a great time. I was young, I was unattached to anybody. So I was working 12 hours days because I just wanted to be so successful. And I was, I was able to get those early recruits. And that was really, I think, the key to being successful early. And then, I had to use the people I knew, the resources I had to be able to get into tournaments. I mean, at that time, it was a pretty closed club of tournaments to go to. and compete in. They would invite the same teams over and over that had been around for, a number of years before that. So I called my coach and I begged her. I said, I think we're pretty good. Let us come down to your tournament. So slowly but surely we would get in those bigger tournaments and we were able to get enough attention to be able to win our conference and to be able to get to nationals. Back then, I was actually coaching before they had that regional model, and then they implemented the regional model that changed things. That was long before they had match play as the final model of nationals. So it was a learning experience for sure. I had a great time doing it, and I gave everything I had to it. And all my 20s were dedicated to doing that. But we saw the success, and it made me want to continue. I ended up, starting a family and moving to the East Coast, and that made it difficult. So I started my first Division III boy, men's job. Also, ironically, because of Title IX, it was an all-women's college that had brought men onto campus at Immaculata University. So because of Title IX, they also needed to equal out the numbers. Title IX doesn't actually have anything to do with women. It has to do with equality. So because they were an all-women's college and they were bringing men on campus, they needed to add men's sports to be equal. So I started a men's team there and thought it would just be fun, and now here we are 25 years later. Division III is no joke. It's real athletics, it's real competition, and it's my background at NAU was a good launch pad for everything I've done since then.
Yeah. You mentioned also starting the team at Immaculata. So what has it been, or what have you learned from starting various programs, whether it be like, NAU or Immaculata? Just what have you learned from, starting various different, programs at different schools?
Yeah, I've learned that a coach is only as good as the sport he or she has behind her. It is, when you don't have the support, when you don't have the financial support or the work power force behind you, it's difficult. It's an uphill climb. Every school has its challenges, of course, and just by location or just by the nature of whatever that school's challenges are. But each school I've learned what are my challenges and how can I overcome them. Immaculata taught me a lot about doing a lot with a little. We did get to nationals. We did the best we could, but my resources were slim there. When I transferred next to Cabrini, I had all the support in the world, but again, financial resources were tight. So we did the best we could. We went to as many tournaments as we could. We fundraised. We tried to do everything we could to get to where we wanted to get, and we also had a national appearance, eventually there. Swarthmore's been the first place that I've had, the support and some financial means. It's still Division III, but it's been fun. It's been fun to be able to have more support in both areas and to be able to have the attention from the recruits, toward me instead of having me to go out and find them. So each place has taught me more and more, and really that's the goal in life, right? Is to keep learning and growing as a person, and it's been fun. It's been a fun ride.
Yeah. And finally, I'll end on this, Coach. You've, coached at a lot of schools, NAU, Smith College, Cabrini, Immaculata, and now Swarthmore. So just what do you enjoy most about, being a college golf coach, and what do you enjoy most about getting to work with, young student athletes?
I think probably the thing I love most is when they call me up and they tell me that they'd like me to come to their wedding, or I get a birth announcement that they're starting a family, or they get a new job or something along that. It's actually not the work itself that you do day to day. It's the pride that you get in watching them grow up to be decent, hardworking, dedicated, loving, members of society. And that is the real joy of it, really, for me.